Shalom and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. China, Russia, France, Britain, and Germany continue to pursue ways of preserving the nuclear deal with Iran, voicing their frustration at President Donald Trump's decision to immediately withdraw the United States from commitments made by his predecessor Barack Obama, in which President Trump decreed Washington's vote in favor of UN Security Council Resolution 2231 that endorsed the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, which is the technical term of the nuclear deal, as null and void. To further discuss the current situation on the Iranian front, I'm joined here in the studio by Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve, Reuven Ben Shalom, who is a cross-cultural strategist and a columnist at the Jerusalem Post. Welcome. I'd like also to welcome our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren, and Mr. Meir Javed Anfar, who is an Iran lecturer at IDC Herzliya, and Dr. Eldad Pardo, who is a research director at Impact SE and a lecturer on Iran at the Hebrew University, Jerusalem. Welcome. Mr. Oren, give us a broader understanding of the current chain of events, considering the fact that the global focus is not necessarily on Iran, but rather North Korea, but everything has some kind of a connection.
Indeed, the limelight is on North Korea, but even when summing up the summit with North Korean leader Kim, President Trump, for some reason, mentioned the Iran deal as the next project on his agenda, even though he said it will take some time for the Iranians to decide on their next move. But prior to his going to Singapore, President Trump isolated the United States when he took part in the G7 conference in Canada. And for another reason, this was, of course, on the economic front. This had to do with the tariff controversy. But nevertheless, President Trump and the United States need allies if they want to isolate Iran on the nuclear front rather than the United States. And what we have seen so far in the several weeks since the United States have withdrawn from the deal is that, as you said in your introduction, the European allies, as well as China and Russia, all of those parties to the deal are more aligned with Iran than with the United States. The sanctions are probably hurting, but not hurting enough because there is no united front vis-a-vis Iran.
Nevertheless, they do aspire to be more aligned with the $22 trillion economy of the United States than the somewhat of a meager economy of Iran comparably. Colonel Ben Shalom, how do you perceive this?
Well, I think we usually make a mistake. I think especially Israelis, we like to do this, to see things in a very small scope. So right now, North Korea, most of my friends are saying, look, amazing success. Well, of course, this is not success. It's just some kind of shuffling of the cards. Absolutely no way of knowing where this is going to go. There was a deal once with North Korea. We saw where that went. Also here, withdrawing from the deal by President Trump, to me, it's just shuffling the cards or reshuffling them again. It's certainly not that Iran wants the nuclear bomb. We prevented it by the deal, and now we don't have a deal, so we quickly have to find another better deal to prevent them from the bomb. I think this is just seeing the whole thing in the wrong dimension. Mm-hmm. Personally, by the way, I don't think Iran wants a nuclear weapon right now, because if they will want a nuclear weapon, they will ultimately have it. The whole idea is how to make it or create a situation where Iran still further into the future does not want the nuclear weapon. So my first recommendation is to zoom out and see it in this perspective to figure out how this reshuffling is going to take us. It's going to take a year or two.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Javed Anfar?
I think the Supreme Leader of Iran would like the prognosis of Mr. Amir Oren would like it very much because it's very optimistic, but in reality, things are looking really bad. To be honest with you, the way things are going, I think on the one hand, the deal is dead. I think Iran is going to be left with no other choice but to go back to enrichment prior to the deal and to go back to where it left off. Because domestically, the regime has an audience that it has to satisfy, and that's its base. Without this base, it wouldn't exist. But on the other hand, I have to tell you, the economy is entering a nosedive. I really don't know how they're going to get out of it. People are panicking. They are, according to a recent report by one of the Majlis committees of the parliament, over the last 2 years, that's before Trump canceled the deal, Iranians have taken out more than $59 billion worth of funds They've transferred $59 billion worth of funds abroad. So if you, for example, according to the same report, if you compare that to Iran's oil income, that's equivalent to more than 80% of oil income last year of Iran being transferred directly abroad. The price of gold is increasing. You know, a barometer to measure how people are freaking out in Iran is to look at the price of gold and price of dollars, and both are going through the roof. This is going to push up the price of inflation. I just don't see Iran being able to pull up because, and I think this is probably worries Ayatollah Khamenei more, if not it should. President Rouhani was just in the Shanghai Cooperation Conference, and the Chinese and the Russians did not agree to bring Iran closer. They've got their own problems with America. The Chinese want to solve the ZTE case with ZTE communication, and this is really this is entering a nosedive.
Dr. Pardo?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think I agree also with Reuven's analysis that we're talking about reshuffling of the cards in the sense that today the United States is playing the role of erstwhile Netanyahu. Netanyahu was outside the negotiations and he was threatening and playing the chimpanzee and all that. Now it's the United States, and it's different. It's the different weight between the United States and Israel. The pressure from outside on European negotiators is, of course, a zillion times higher than the Israeli. On the other hand, I would like to point something as regards Iran, and I think Netanyahu was a little bit, overstepping in his last video to the Iranian people. He spoke about helping them with water and criticizing the regime. The problem is that the Iranians are really afraid of becoming a second Syria. And I think that I'm not sure that regime change is the best solution for everyone, neither for the Iranian people and everybody else, because you really you can go into a situation that is really unexpected. So I think the world should reassure the Iranian people and maybe the regime that the unity of Iran will be preserved anyhow, whether they stick to the regime or destroy the regime. And it's up to the regime to change the strategy. And I think that they will have to change the strategy.
With regard to a possible new deal that would entail also Iran's ballistic missile program as well as its activities across the region, to what degree is there willingness in Tehran to even revisit such an idea, considering the fact that now, if indeed the United States would reach a comprehensive agreement with North Korea, it might find itself also isolated with a shifting attitude from the Europeans and the Chinese, for that matter. So to what degree do you believe that the Iranian regime of Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is actually tentative to this situation?
Well, you mentioned two different subjects, even though people outside of Iran tend to put them together. The activities, the so-called malign activities abroad, in the Middle East, Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and so forth, and the ballistic missile program. These are two distinct programs because coming out of Syria, for instance, can be depicted as being a policy move which the Iranian leadership has decided upon independently. The Syrian regime asked them to leave, or they completed their mission. While the ballistic missile program, I don't think they are going to cancel. For them, it is as much part of their national pride, and they can also say that this is part of the space program. It's the same missile. The third stage can either take a warhead or a satellite. Now, there was something when the North Korean-American summit ended, which was very interesting in this regard. When Trump was asked regarding the condition which was put before the summit, but was not in the joint statement, that the denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula be irreversible and verifiable, he said, well, after 20%, it's really irreversible. For some reason, he came up with this new scientific fact. Why is this important? Because Trump has the power to redefine his objectives and therefore his success. He can have a new deal which will not be so different from the old deal. But by virtue of being able to say, this is my deal, this is different, now I can verify it, he can push it through.
Nevertheless, Colonel Ben Shalom, when we're talking about the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, none of the world powers have signed this agreement, neither did Iran for that matter. And when we really look into the UN Security Council resolution that endorsed this deal, the 2231, we did have specifics in this, including the claim that this nuclear deal would bring about the contribution to building confidence in the exclusive peaceful nature of Iran's nuclear program, something that even though the IAEA has declared on several occasions, and Iran continues to declare this openly, as well as the other members that have been party of this deal, of Iran's compliance to the variables of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. There is, in paragraph 3 of Annex B of the Security Council resolution, a very specific statement with regard to the ballistic missile program of Iran, with regard to calling upon Iran not to undertake any activity related to ballistic missiles designed to be able to deliver nuclear weapons, including launches using such ballistic missile technology, something Iran, of course, has completely rejected, even though the only reason the JCPOA was brought into effect in the first place was this endorsement of the same Security Council that called on Iran not to undergo this. So to what degree will Iran actually fulfill the desire of the Western powers in containing its malign activities, as Mr. Oren has stated, with regard to the region, as well as its demand with regard to the ballistic missile program?
Well, I think these were completely separate issues. It's like different dimensions, but they were acting as if it's the same. We all see what Iran is doing, and we also have to understand what they want. What is their aspiration? Of course, to be a regional power throughout the Middle East. Okay, their ultimate goal is not to acquire nuclear weapons. I even think that nuclear weapons are a tool now in the mind game with the West, and brilliantly using this tool, and they will, I think, use it again for the next deal in order to sustain their real goal and even do it easier. So the previous deal certainly did not stop or curtail in any way their other activities they were doing throughout the region. It had no impact on the issue of missiles, and why would it? And why would Iran even agree? So I think that right now they're smiling, as they always do. They're very good with smiles, and they're saying, okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to boost the issue of the nuclear issue. We're going to have all these statements, these vague statements, like, okay, we're going back to enrichment in the framework of the deal, and they're going to have us scratching our heads, and what are they doing? We're afraid that they're going to dash to the bomb again, when they have no intention to dash to the bomb, because it's a very bad idea, and they know it, and they don't want it. But they're going to play this very carefully and build another deal that President Trump, and here, by the way, I would upgrade your recommendation and say it will be a deal that President Trump could even prove that is better. It will have a few more restrictions, sort of stopping the Iranian capability, but fully enabling the rest of their activities, because no one is going to tell Iran to surrender and say, you know what, we're right, we lost. Okay, we're going to give you Yemen, we're going to give you Syria. That's not going to happen.
Mr. Javed Anfar, talking about the economy, as you pointed to the fact that the Iranian economy is indeed plunging down right now and is in a very dire state, also considering the fact that the drought is not helping with the situation. Nevertheless, when we look at the Iranian aspirations, it seems like there is a distinct separation between the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard, and the government of Hassan Rouhani, some kind of separation between Iran and the Islamic Republic, if you will. Is this separation... Well, the government and the regime. Absolutely. So to what degree is this separation actually there? And how are those forces playing out, considering the different challenges now that are rising?
Well, I think Mr. Rouhani is very much against what's happening in Syria, not because he doesn't want Iran to be a superpower, but he's just concerned about the price that Iran is paying. And he's seen as the pupil of Ayatollah Rafsanjani, or some see him as Rafsanjani Jr. And Faiza Rafsanjani, the daughter of late Ayatollah Rafsanjani, said recently, our biggest problem is not the nuclear program. Our biggest problem is our policies, which is turning every country in the region against us. And we are basically turning ourselves, pushing our own regime towards overthrow. With the policies of turning everybody against us. We don't have anything planned. In Israel, people say Iranians have long-term plans. Sorry, if you speak to Iranians who recently left Iran, they will curse you if you say that about the current Iranian leadership. However, I think one thing that's probably going to concern the regime very much is that because of this disconnect, that people vote for a president, but the president can't impact the major policies such as Syria, people are becoming more and more anti-regime. It's more becoming fertile. And we saw this recently. Prime Minister Netanyahu was not very popular with Iranians, I have to be honest with you. But then he came with this offer to tell Iranians how to help Iranians how to reuse water. They set up this Telegram channel in Farsi. Yesterday, I remember in the morning, it had 30,000 subscribers. And I thought, wow, 30. By evening, it had jumped to 80,000 subscribers. This is unbelievable. Of course, we have the Ahmad News to thank. This is a very anti-regime Telegram channel, which has 1.5 million subscribers. They publicized it. But there are 80,000 Iranian subscribers, most probably inside Iran. Let's just say even 60 or 70%, I'm sure, because people outside Iran don't have problem with the drought. This is amazing. This goes to show what people are now so desperate they're willing to listen to anybody. It's dangerous to subscribe to Israeli channels. And they're subscribing because people are fed up with this dysfunctionality. If one day the Islamic Republic falls, it's not going to be because of the nuclear program. These are all, or not even the economy. The biggest cause of the fault of the Islamic Republic is the dysfunctionality of the regime trying to work with the government and vice versa. They go against each other. This creates mismanagement. This creates basically actions which offset each other. And this is the issue that's most responsible for the misery which the people of Iran live in today, including the drought.
Dr. Pardo, how is this disconnect not received by the regime in a certain capacity in order to come and actually pursue some changes or reform that would truly bring about a bolster of their capacity within Iranian society, and right now also on the matter of the nuclear agreement and the various dealings with the Western powers? To what degree does the Islamic Republic's regime have the backing of the Iranian people in those negotiations?
Well, change is very painful, and these people in the regime, they are very wealthy, very powerful. They cannot really feel the pain of other people, and they are many years in power, and they succeeded so far. So this is natural. You have to read every revolution theory textbook, and this is the pattern. However, I think that what's going on now may be, in the end of the day, playing out for this revolution, because the world and Trump and the rest of the world provide Iran what they need, and what they need is structure and consequences. So they will have to leave all their ambitions in the Middle East. They will have to change their missile program. They will have to give up the nuclear. And if they want to stick to their ideology, and this is a really ideology that is extremely important because it's an answer to the American Revolution and the French Revolution. It means that we can have a regime with God in it. If they stick to this idea that was born in Iran in the 1960s and 70s, by the way, influenced by others, including by Israel, if they stick to this idea and they try to build the perfect society and influence the world by example, then they have a future. In all likelihood, it will not happen, but I think the role of the world is to tell them, and the role of all the superpowers to tell them, we will keep the unity of Iran. If the regime collapses, there will not be a civil war. there will not be disintegration of Iran. We'll make sure of that.
But can we
And if the
guarantee?
regime,
Can we guarantee?
yeah,
in
of
any
course
way?
you can guarantee, because I think most Iranians, including the Baluchis and the Arabs and everybody, they would prefer a united Iran. There are so many advantages in united Iran. And there is there is, of course, you know better than me, a debate among scholars whether there is this Iranian nationalism that includes everybody. I tend to be more like Persian Iranian in that sense, that I believe that there is strong national identity and a lot to be proud of, and a lot to offer the world in capacity, in everything. So this is a great opportunity for Iran to become one of the leading countries in the world in many, many fields.
Mr. Oren, I'd like to ask you with regard to reported or emerging disagreements between Moscow and Tehran, and also with regard to the ongoing conflict in Syria, with reported disputes between Iranian proxies and Russian forces on the Lebanese border, and other reports with regard to Iranian-backed forces disguising themselves in military, Syrian military uniforms in coming back to the border with Israel, and a lot of different reports that bring into question, to what degree does Iran and Russia actually have a complete understanding with regard to the various war arenas, including Syria, and to what degree would Moscow fight for Iran until the last moment with regard to the nuclear agreement?
They will fight until the last Iranian, perhaps, not until the last moment. But no two countries really have an identity of interests. It is impossible. Each country has its own national interests. Of course, it has allies, it has partners. There is some dovetailing of interests, but you can't really speak about Russian interests being identical to Iranian ones. Now, we mention Russia and Iran in the same sentence as if they are co-equals. They are not. Each country has one vote in the UN General Assembly, but Russia, even though it is no longer the superpower that it was during the Cold War, nevertheless is the world's second most powerful country nuclear-wise. Of course, in other senses, China and India and the EU are much better economically, but nevertheless, in pure military power, Russia is still something of a superpower, while Iran is not. Iran is a regional power. Iran, to some degree, emulated the old Soviet Union by trying to export the revolution. It's really Khomeiniism instead of communism. But the idea was the same. This is the homeland of the idea, the Soviet Union or Iran, and we are now exporting it to Eastern Europe or even Latin America, or in the Iranian case to Lebanon and other places. But of course, Russia has its own interests. And just to tie into what Reuven earlier said, calling the nuclear military program a tool, I would offer a similar term, a bargaining chip. Most countries go for nuclear weapons out of a defensive state of mind. They want to deter some bigger, more powerful neighbor, and they think that the nuclear weapons will keep them safer. They know that they cannot use nuclear weapons, and especially not vis-a-vis the United States or Russia, which can decimate them 1,000 times over. So what the Iranians wisely did 3 years ago is trade in their bargaining chips for the incentives which were offered them and have only partially been implemented. Now they are going to do it again. They still have some bargaining chips in the nuclear programs. They want to be one turn of the screw away from a nuclear weapon. I agree, they don't want the nuclear weapons themselves.
Well, I'd like to bring Israel into the picture, Colonel Ben Shalom. When we're looking at last week, we had Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu travel to Europe, visiting with E3, or the 3 European members that were part of the negotiations with Iran, including France, Britain, and Germany. During his trip, Netanyahu emphasized that he's not coming. On several occasions, he emphasized that he's not coming to try and advocate why the nuclear agreement should be scrapped because, in his opinion, the deal is dead, as Mr. Javed Anfar also mentioned earlier. To what degree is now this communication line between the three powers in Europe and Israel open with regard to Iran's activities in Syria and elsewhere across the region that Israel still has vocal concerns about with regard to Iran's declared aspiration of annihilating the Jewish state?
It's interesting because the perception inside Israel about the prime minister and the government's international relations is very different. So many on the left side, of course, say that we have crashed all our lines of communication and no one listens to us. I think, in fact, we're getting better in diplomacy. I call it Chinese diplomacy, which means no longer the good guys, bad guys, but a diplomacy of interests and working with different powers in the region. When not always are you totally aligned with that power, just like we do with Russia. So I think the prime minister has the ear of some of these leaders and well respected for his views. So I think Israel is listened to. I don't like the rhetoric of the Israeli leadership. I don't like it at all. I think we should do as we do and do more, but talk less. Before he left to Europe, he said, I'm going to deal with two issues, Iran and Iran. And for us, many Israelis will say, that's the way, show them. I disagree. Deal with Iran a lot because it is a substantial threat to Israel. Don't talk about it so much. So I think this has to be recalibrated under the radar, work very closely, and then we will have their ear more.
Well, we're drawing near to the end of the program, so I'd like to give each and every one of you a closing sentence. Unfortunately, we don't have more time than that. Mr. Javed Anfar, we'll start with you.
When it comes to Iran's presence in the region and the missile program, although both are very much against our interests, let's not go for a zero-sum strategy again of win or lose, because that's going to take much longer to reach an agreement. Let's save ourselves a lot of time and effort and pain by reaching a deal which serves our interests but leaves the other side with something. Humiliating the other side doesn't, in the long term, always serve your security interests.
Dr. Pardo?
I couldn't agree more. I think there is room also for ideological and cultural dialogue with Iran. And definitely we shouldn't decide for the Iranians who will be their regime. However, I think the nuclear project of Iran is extremely dangerous, and it's about proliferation, and it's about world hegemony, not regional hegemony.
Colonel Ben Shalom?
Learn from Zarif. Smile. Smile a lot. That's good politics.
Mr. Oren?
Prime Minister Ariel Sharon had the right idea some 15 years ago. Take Israel off stage. Iran is the world's problem. It is also Israel's, but it is not primarily Israel. Israel shouldn't put itself front and center in this issue. Let the other powers lead.
Well, this is all the time that we have for today, so I'd like to thank Colonel Ben Shalom, Mr. Oren, Mr. Javed Anfar, and Dr. Pardo for coming here today. And I'd like to thank our viewers as well, and we will see you next time. TV7 Israel's mission is to give you, our viewers, truthful information, which in effect will give you a chance to really understand what is happening in Israel and its region. If you're blessed by our programs and believe our mission to be important, we urge you to support us and become a voice for Israel. You can support us by going to our website at tv7israelnews.com. This program was made possible through your donations.